When I was still in high school, my bedroom at my mom's was the only one upstairs. Right next to my bedroom was a loft area, and on the farthest wall from my room was a TV and the door to the guest bedroom. I would spend plenty of nights just sprawled out on the floor of the loft where I'd fall asleep watching TV. One night, however, I was watching Friends on Nick at night and fell asleep. It was around 1 a.m. that I had passed out, and the two people who still lived there at the time, my mother and sister, were not home. My mom was out starting her paper route she did every Sunday, and my sister spent the night at her boyfriend's. I remember having very peculiar dreams that night, can't recall the details, likely due to the fear that followed their abrupt ending. At 3:27 a.m., the door to the guest bedroom about 4 feet from me slams shut, so loud I wake up in a complete panic. Lights that were on when I fell asleep are now off, and the TV in front of me is not on Nick at Night. It's on an uncomfortably loud white fuzz. I sit in absolute shock for probably 30 seconds while I listen to try and hear what it is that just slammed that door shut. Part of me almost wants to cry out of fear. After nothing but the fuzz from the TV seems to be making any noise, I decide to get up and turn the lights back on. My heart is racing as I slowly approach the light switch, which is of course right next to the door that just flung closed. I flip it and immediately rush to the other side of the loft. The hairs on the back of my neck stand completely up as I hear the sound of creaks on the wooden floor of our kitchen downstairs. "Mom!" I mistakenly yell down the stairs. No response. At this point, it's all I can do to not lose my shit, and I run straight to my bedroom and lock the door behind me. I call my mom, who didn't answer, and spend the next hour watching as many happy videos on YouTube as I can while I try to just suppress all the fear that just overcame me. Haven't actually told anyone about this since, and it wasn't until I saw this question that I remembered it even happened. Horribly scary. Just writing this has me on edge. Also should note that I do not believe in spirits or ghosts or anything of that sort. I can't really explain this event, and it definitely had me questioning this disbelief for a moment. Once, I went on a trip to St. Augustine, Florida. I was trying to get away for a couple days and just relax, have some fun, shop, etc. I decided to go to Ripley's Believe It or Not, because it was a good place to park for free, included with my ticket purchase, while I waited on my hotel room to become available. I approached the quite large, somewhat ominous, small castle-like building. There was a large statue of David out front, guarded by tall hedges to hide his fruits. I went inside to pick up my tickets for the Red Train City tour and decided to buy a tour of the museum aspect of the place, since I had some time to kill. I finalized my purchase and proceeded on the tour. On the on-side, the building looked like an old mansion. I went up the first flight of stairs and gazed at the many curiosities the museum holds, including an art piece of Marilyn Monroe portrait made of pennies, a Freddie Krueger portrait made of candy, a giant ivory ship, and a crown of thorns that allegedly was made from the same tree that was used for Jesus' crown of thorns. As I made my way to close of the tour, I reached the top floor where there was a small, movie theater, with 5 rows of seats. The theater played scenes from Ripley's famous TV shows and talked about the different items in the facility. I sat in the back of the theater on the outside of the row, closest to the exit, and began watching the film. A woman walked by me and was wearing what looked like a period 1850s or early 1900s Victorian-style dress. I looked at the woman out of the corner of my eye and continued watching the film. The film ended and began to start again, as it looped continuously, and I noticed the woman at some point had left and I hadn't noticed. I walked out of the theater and finished the tour, and I remember thinking how neat it was that they had people in costume to really sell the Victorian feel of the place. I thought perhaps there were others in costume, but I didn't notice anyone else in costume. I didn't think much of it until I approached the woman at the front desk to ask her, "Where are the other costume people? And could I get my picture taken with them?" The woman looked at me like a crazy person. She said, "We don't have anyone in costume." I said, "Are you sure? Because I saw a woman in the theater who was." Just smiled and said, "Oh, that's probably one of the women who were found here after the fire." She went on to explain they 2 women were found dead after a fire in the residence back in the 1800s. Their deaths are a mystery because they were both found in the same position, on separate floors of the building. Despite the fire, they had both drowned in the bathtub. Rumors had it they were murdered, but the killer was never found. The spot where the theater is, was formerly one of the bathrooms where one of the women was found. I was cleaning out my grandmother's attic several years ago. The section of the attic was used by my deceased aunt 30 years ago. She died when she was 17. I heard my voice being called, so I answered, and received no response. I shrugged and continued working. Then I heard it again. I figured my mom stopped by, she can be hard of hearing, so I walked downstairs. Nothing. I walk outside, and my car is the only car in the driveway. I cock it up to hearing things, old farmhouse, or just being alone stuck with this work. I finished what I was doing and left. Next weekend I returned with my girlfriend at the time, and father. My father and I worked in the barn, and my GF was packing boxes in the house. About an hour goes by and she comes walking around to the barn pissed off, and wanting to know what we wanted. Someone called her name. Both my father and myself were puzzled since we both had been in the barn. I hadn't mentioned the previous week, or even thought about it. Even when she was mad and asking who called her, I didn't connect the two together. It wasn't until we went to my parents' house and my GF told my mother about the indecent. She thought I did call to her and was trying to creep her out. Which would have been true, just not this time. As soon as she told my mom, everything started to connect it for me, little slow sometimes. My mom grew wide-eyed and still. I was a bit alarmed, and then she said she heard her name being called as well weeks ago, and she knew the voice. It was my aunt's. She thought she had imagined it, and forgot about it till my GF brought it up. Then my GF looks at me and says it was a woman's voice. That didn't occur to her until just then. Then I remembered the same thing happened to me the earlier week. I confessed to my mom and GF that I might have heard something as well, but the unsettling part was I was pretty sure I did, twice. I'm a skeptic but I do enjoy wondering if I'm wrong and it's not just a coincidence.